and welcome. In this video, we're going to be covering the applications of systems of linear equations. And this is a continuation of our series on systems of equations and inequalities, and more specifically, a continuation of our solving systems algebraically. Okay, so if you haven't watched that video, make sure that you go ahead and do that. I'll put a link in the description. All right, because in this video, I'm not going to go through step by step how to actually solve the system. This video is mainly intended for helping you set up the system. Okay, I'm going to assume that if you're here, you already know how to solve systems. This is just to set it up. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at this problem here. So in this problem, it says in one day, the Museum of Science and Industry took in $2,614 between children and adult tickets. Children tickets cost $8 each and adult tickets cost $15 each, okay? And if there are a total of 255 visitors to the museum, how many of each type of ticket was sold? Now, when I'm doing these types of problems, one thing I'm always looking at is what are we actually being asked to solve, because that's going to help us determine what our variables should be, okay? In some problems, it will actually tell you what the variables are, but in a lot of them, they will not. So I'm looking right here and it says how many of each type of ticket was sold. That's telling me what my variable should be. So one of my variables should be how many children tickets were sold, and my other variable should be how many adult tickets were sold. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. So I'm going to say C is equal to the number of children tickets sold. Children tickets sold. Okay. And I'm going to say A is equal to the number of adult tickets sold. Adult tickets sold. Okay. I highly recommend that you kind of focus with the end in mind, okay? Because that can also help you figure out what your equation should end up looking like and what information you're really going for. Now, they told me a few different key pieces of information here. One key piece of information is how much money the museum took in total, which was $2,614. And it also told me how much each type of ticket was. It told me that children tickets were $8 each and adult tickets were $15 each, okay? So that all kind of gels together. Money goes with money, okay? So if I'm talking about, hey, this is how much money we brought in, our other side of the equation should be talking of something in regards to money as well, okay? Because I can set up an equation with this in mind. I already know that they took in $2,614. Okay, so I know one side of the equation should be equal to that total amount. But how did we get there? Well, they sold children tickets for $8 each. So if I take the number of children tickets that were sold, which I'm saying is C because we don't know that yet, and I multiply that by 8, that's going to tell me exactly how much money was made off of selling children's tickets, okay? And then if I look at adults, well, if I take how many adult tickets were sold, which I don't know, that's A, and I multiply it by how much each adult ticket is, which is 15, that's going to tell me how much money they made off of selling adult tickets. Now, if I take how much money they made selling children's tickets and add that to how much money they made selling adult tickets, that is going to end up giving me my total, okay? So that is one of our equations. Take how much money was made in general or total and figure out how it got there. Children's tickets and adult tickets, okay? Now, the other part of the problem that we haven't covered yet is this key piece of information right here. They sold a total of 255 tickets because they had a total of 255 visitors. Well, I know that one side of my equation should now be equal to 255, okay? Now, how did we get there? Well, to get to the total number of tickets sold, I would take how many children's tickets were sold and how many adult tickets were sold and add them together. And how many of each were sold? We don't know. That's what our variables actually represent. So if I take how many children tickets were sold, which I'm saying is C, and I add that to how many adult tickets were sold, which is A, that's going to get me my total of 255 tickets, okay? So this is your system of equations, and this is what we could use to figure out exactly how many tickets of each type were sold. All right. Remember, you can use elimination. You can use substitution. If you really want to, remember, you can go ahead and get these in slope-intercept form and graph it, find where the lines intersect. Feel free to do that as well. I'm going to go ahead and solve this algebraically, and I'm going to use substitution. So I encourage you to pause the video here, solve this for yourself, but I'm going to go ahead and solve this now. Okay, so there is our final answer. So I went ahead and used substitution. Feel free to do that. You could have solved for A or C. You also could have used elimination to cancel out A or C. Both methods work very, very well in this particular problem. But once we went ahead and solved, I solved for children's tickets first. I got 173, so that tells me 173 of those 255 were children tickets. So now all I got to do is take how many total tickets there are and subtract how many children tickets were sold, which I found to get the number of adult tickets, which was 82. So our final answer is 173 children tickets and 82 adult tickets. And I highly recommend that you always kind of write your answer out in plain English or whatever language you do, okay, or speak, right out there on the page, okay? So 173 children tickets and 82 adult tickets. And that would be our final answer. Okay, so that's one example. Let's go ahead and take a look at another one. Okay, so we have another example here, all right? We have a new example. Now, in this problem, it says during 1 year, you invested $5,000 in two separate funds, okay? One earning 2% and another earning 5% annual interest. So we put $5,000 in two funds. One of them is earning 2% annual interest. The other one's earning 5% annual interest. Now, the interest you actually earn at the end of that year was $205. So good on you. You got a little bit more money. Question is, how much money did you invest in each fund? And right there, that is telling me, right here, that is telling me what my variable should represent. What am I trying to find? Well, how much money did we put in each fund? There's our variables, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and say X is the money invested in the 2% fund, invested in 2% fund. And I'm going to say Y is the money invested or amount invested in the 5% fund, okay? Because that is what we're trying to find. That should be our variables, okay? Now, how do we get there? All right, well, let's take a look. So they're saying you invested $5,000. We invested $5,000, okay? Well, now I know that I should have something equal to 5,000. Well, we invested 5,000 in two funds. How did we get there? Well, I take how much money I invested in the 2% fund. If I add that to how much money we invested in the 5% fund, that should tell me how much total money we invested, which is 5,000. Well, how much did we invest in each fund? That's what we don't know. We're trying to figure that out. X is how much we invested in the 2% fund. Y is how much we invested in the 5% fund. If I add those two funds together, that's going to tell me how much we invested total, which we do know is $5,000. Okay. Now, the next part of information that we need to look at is the fact that one of these funds is earning 2% and the other is earning 5% interest. And the total interest was $205. I didn't mean to like cross that out. I was supposed to kind of underline it, but I got a little carried away. So we earned $205 in interest. So I know that's what we're going to be equal to, okay? Well, how did we get there? Well, if I take how much money we invested in the 2% fund and multiply it by 2%, that's going to tell me how much interest we made in that specific fund. So if I go ahead and I take 2%, which remember you want it in decimal form, which is 0.02. So if I take 2% and multiply it by how much I invested in that fund, it's going to tell me how much money I made in that specific fund, okay? And if I take how much money I invested in the 5% fund, which is Y, and multiply it by 5%, which is 0.05, that's going to tell me how much money we earned in the 5% fund. And if I add these two together, that's going to tell me how much money we made total in interest, which is $205. Now, there is a slightly different way of obtaining that information. You can actually add that to the 5,000, but that's going to change this side of the equation here, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and focus on it this way. And now we have our system of equations. We tackled every piece of information in this problem. There's nothing else from this problem that we have not used, okay? So now we can go ahead and solve it. You can use elimination or substitution. If you have been watching for a while, you know I'm going to use substitution. So I'm going to go ahead and use substitution, but go ahead and try this out on your own. Okay, so this is what you should have gotten as your answer. I went ahead and used substitution and solved for my variable of y. I substituted it in to find my x, and that got me $1,500. So that tells me that $1,500 was invested at 2% or in a 2% fund, okay? And that's 1,500 of 5,000. So to find how much was invested in the other account, all I have to do is take 5,000 and subtract how much I invested in that 2% fund, and that left me with 3,500. So that tells me that $1,500 was invested in the 2% fund and $3,500 was invested in the 5% fund, okay? So that is another example, all right? Now I do want to take a look at just one more, and this actually is a slightly different one. We don't talk about money in this one. This one involves perimeter, which is a fairly common type of problem, especially on like the ACT and SAT. You will see this quite often. So let's go ahead and take a look at that problem. All right, so we got another problem here. So we have the width of a picture frame is 3 inches less than the length, okay? The perimeter of the picture frame is 22 inches. What are the dimensions of the picture frame? And right there, that's what my variables are going to be. I want to know the dimensions. I want to know the dimensions of the picture frame. So there's my variable. So I'm going to say W is equal to the width of the picture frame. And I'm going to say L, let me use a capital L so it doesn't look like a 1, is equal to the length of the picture frame. So that's what I'm trying to solve for, okay? So now I got to figure out what my equations are. And actually, let me go ahead and say what unit of measurement we're doing. It's in inches. It kept saying inches, so make sure you include that as well. In the previous problems, notice I said like money, the unit was dollars, okay? You should include units if it's giving you units, okay? So now we want to tackle the rest of this problem. Well, it's telling me that the width of the picture frame is 3 inches less than the length, so that's a pretty important piece of information, okay? And these are actually the ones that give a lot of people fits. How do I write that as an equation? Well, if the width is 3 inches less than the length, if the length was 10 inches, that means the width would be 7, right? And if the length was like 15 inches, then the width would be 12. Well, how are we getting that? Well, in order to find the width, I am taking whatever the length is, and I'm subtracting 3 from it, okay? That's what that equation should end up looking like. And notice all those examples I just made up off the top of my head would end up fitting that description, okay? So I do recommend just making up like an example in your head and testing it out. If the length is 15, the width should be 12. It works out if I plug that in, okay? So the width of the picture frame is 3 inches less than the length. Boom, I have that accounted for. Now, the other part of the problem is saying, okay, well, the perimeter of the picture frame is 22 inches. Well, you should remember perimeter is just when you add all the sides together, all right? And this picture frame, generally, I guess I should have mentioned that this picture frame is rectangular. I probably should have mentioned that because, yeah, now that I'm thinking it could be like a circular picture frame. But I'm going to say this is a rectangular one. That's my bad. Sorry. All right, but this rectangular picture frame, well, to get the perimeter of a rectangle, we just add the 4 sides together, and there's 2 lengths and there's 2 widths, okay? So if I take the 2 widths and add them together, that's 2W. And I take the 2 lengths and I add them together, that's 2L. And if I take all 4 sides and I add them together, that gets me my perimeter. And the perimeter, they're telling me, is 22, okay? And there is our equations. Now, I know I'm biased towards substitution, but if you're looking at this problem and you're thinking anything but substitution, your thinking might be a little bit flawed because this one is absolutely primed for substitution because we already have a variable solved for. We don't have to do any work there. So I can go ahead and just straight up plug in L minus 3 in for W, and I'm on my way. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. Go ahead and try this on your own as well. Highly encourage it. All right, so once we went ahead and solved that problem, like I said, definitely primed for substitution. I ended up getting that the length of the picture frame was 7 inches, And then it's as simple as taking apart the information that, okay, the width is 3 inches less than that, so just subtract 3 from 7. That gets me 4. So the width of the picture frame was 4 inches, and the length of the picture frame was 7 inches, okay? So that is that problem. That's all I really wanted to cover. If you want more examples, please just feel free to let me know. I can make another couple of videos, or at least there's one more video with a couple more examples. But in the next couple of videos, we're going to be covering 3 variable systems, and I also will be making videos for the applications of 3 variable systems, okay? I hope this video was helpful. If you have any questions, please feel free to let me know, and I will see you in the next video.